What if the cartoons you grew up with were only a fraction of what the 1960s truly created? That decade produced a strange, forgotten universe of side characters, superheroes, animal mascots, and bizarre adventurers who briefly lit up Saturday mornings before vanishing into the static of television history. Today we dig deep into the backrooms of animation to resurrect 20 cartoon characters you forgot ever existed. Cool McCool, 1966. Cool McCool was meant to be the swinging secret agent for a new era, but history remembers him only as the spy who could never quite get anything right. With his trench coat, thick mustache, and flat monotone voice, he wandered through assignments that always fell apart in spectacular fashion. This forgotten hero came from Batman creator Bob Kane, who hoped to build a spy spoof that matched the camp craze of the decade. The show followed McCool as he bungled missions against villains with names as outrageous as their designs, including Dr. Madcap and Jack in the Box. McCool relied on gadgets that malfunctioned more often than they worked, turning every episode into a chain reaction of escalating disasters. Yet, that was the charm. He survived every failure with accidental luck, a trait that made him strangely endearing. Behind the scenes, the series struggled with budget limits and stiff competition from more polished Saturday morning hits. Kids loved the bright colors and goofy villains, but networks were unsure how to market a bumbling spy. By the end of its run, it faded into syndication shadows. Today, Cool McCool remains a relic of a time when creators took risks with slapstick espionage, hoping lightning would strike twice. Batfink, 1966. Batfink was created as a comedic counter to the rising flood of grim crime fighters, yet he wound up forgotten despite having some of the most memorable catchphrases of the era. His wings of steel and supersonic sonar radar became signposts of the show's playful style. Unlike brooding heroes, Batfink stood barely 3 feet tall and relied more on confidence than strength to defeat criminals. Produced by Hal Seeger, the show paired Batfink with Karate, his oversized martial arts expert sidekick, whose loyalty often created more chaos than help. Together they faced villains shaped by mid-60s pop culture, including mad scientists, giant monsters, and groovy gangsters. Every episode unfolded like a parody of classic superhero adventures, with fast plots, bright colors, and snappy humor. Behind the scenes, the studio crafted episodes quickly using limited animations techniques, making Batfink cheap to produce, but also easy for audiences to overlook. The show aired in syndication rather than on major networks, meaning it rarely received the promotion or tie-in merchandise needed for long-term fame. Still, it gained a cult following thanks to its unique blend of superhero spoof and Saturday morning charm. Today, Batfinks exists as a nostalgic footnote, a tiny caped crusader who flew across screens for a brief moment before vanishing into television history. Ricochet Rabbit, 1964. Ricochet Rabbit emerged during Hanna-Barbera's boom years, but unlike their household icons, he never reached the heights of global fame. His entire persona was built around speed. The moment trouble appeared, he bounced across town with a ricochet sound effect, firing ping, ping, ping as he zipped between walls and rooftops. This high-energy style defined his brief but memorable run. He served as the sheriff of the dusty frontier town of Hoop and Holler, solving crimes with impossible agility, paired with his loyal deputy Droop-Along Coyote, who constantly stumbled into danger. Their stories mixed Old West tropes with slapstick humor, giving kids a combination of cowboy action and fast-paced comedy. Ricochet's personality was equal parts heroic and hyperactive, making him stand out from calmer cartoon lawmen of the time. Despite appearing on The Magilla Gorilla Show, Ricochet Rabbit never received major promotion. Hanna-Barbera was producing dozens of characters, and he simply became lost in the crowd. His fast movement also limited animation quality, making the show visually repetitive. When the cowboy craze faded, he disappeared from the schedule. Now, Ricochet Rabbit survives mostly in fragments on retro cartoon channels, a forgotten hero of the frontier who once bounced across the screen faster than any sheriff before him. Wally Gator, 1962. Wally Gator was one of the earliest Hanna-Barbera characters to headline his own rotating segment. Yet he is surprisingly absent from modern nostalgia. Wearing a hat and bow tie, Wally lived in a zoo but dreamed of freedom. Every episode followed his attempts to escape, only to be chased down by the nervous zookeeper, Mr. Twiddle. This simple setup created a cycle of mischief and gentle comedy. Unlike louder cartoons, Wally Gator offered a calmer style, focusing on personality rather than action. Wally spoke with a charming southern drawl, treating every escape as an adventure rather than a rebellion. His antics usually ended with him wandering back into his enclosure, realizing the outside world was far less welcoming than he expected. The show balanced humor with a soft message about comfort, safety, and belonging. Behind the scenes, Wally suffered from timing. Hanna-Barbera launched him alongside other segments like Touche Turtle and Lippy the Lion, meaning he competed for attention from the start. Merchandise was minimal, and network rotations were inconsistent, causing younger audiences to forget him quickly. Today, Wally Gator remains a quiet legacy character, remembered only by dedicated classic cartoon fans. A gentle alligator who just wanted to roam a little wider than his zoo walls allowed. The Super President. The Super President remains one of the most unusual and controversial cartoons of the 1960s. A show that imagined the President of the United States secretly fighting crime using superpowers. Jim Thornton, the fictional commander-in-chief, could transform his body into steel, water, energy, or any material needed to shield America from futuristic threats. What sounded bold on paper quickly became one of the strangest blends of patriotism and pulp fiction ever aired on Saturday mornings. Episodes followed Thornton as he balanced presidential duties with covert missions handled from his hidden command center. Alongside his trusted aide Jerry Sales, he battled robots, alien warlords, giant monsters, and unhinged scientists who somehow always threatened national security at the exact wrong moment. The tone tried to be serious, yet the image of a glowing, shape-shifting president left many viewers unsure whether to salute or laugh. Behind the scenes, the timing couldn't have been worse. With real-world political tensions rising, networks grew uneasy about showcasing a president who solved crises with super strength rather than diplomacy. Critics mocked the premise, parents complained, and the show quietly disappeared from schedules. Today, Super President is remembered as a bizarre relic, an earnest but misguided attempt to mix civic leadership with comic book spectacle. Arabian Knights, 1968. Arabian Nights brought the atmosphere of Middle Eastern folklore into Saturday morning, programming attempting to combine ancient legends with the modern superhero-style teamwork. The series followed Prince Turhan, a heroic royal who escaped imprisonment and gathered a team of gifted allies to overthrow an evil ruler. Among them was Rasim, the strongman, Bez, the acrobat, Zazwoom, the shapeshifter, and Fariek, the magician, whose spells illuminated every battle. Premiering as a segment on the Banana Splits Adventure Hour, the show offered exotic landscapes, fast-paced fights, and stories inspired loosely by old tales like 1001 Nights. The vibrant settings and mystical themes gave it a distinct identity compared to typical 60s science fiction and slapstick-oriented cartoons. Production was ambitious but faced limitations. Each episode had only minutes to establish location, introduce danger, and show a magical transformation or heroic action sequence. This led to condensed storytelling, where dramatic moments moved at impossible speed. Still, the unique powers and diverse team dynamic gained attention for originality. Despite its creativity, Arabian Nights never gained strong marketing support and faded when the Banana Splits format changed. Today it survives mostly through nostalgic memories of viewers who recall its dazzling whirlwinds of magic and adventure. The Beagles, 1966. The Beagles were a musical cartoon duo created during the height of Beatlemania, yet they quickly vanished from the cultural spotlight despite being one of the earliest animated attempts to parody a real rock band. Comprised of Stringer and Tubby, two anthropomorphic dogs modeled after the British invasion. Their series followed them through chaotic recording sessions, strange publicity events, and misadventures with over-eager managers. Produced by Total Television Productions, the same studio behind Underdog, the cartoon was lighthearted but surprisingly witty. Episodes featured original songs, quirky humor, and playful jabs at the music industry, which was rapidly transforming during the 60s. The Beagles offered a family-friendly way to introduce children to the world of rock bands without the intensity that came from real celebrity culture. Behind the scenes, however, the show suffered from a tangled web of rights issues. Master tapes were misplaced during a network ownership transfer, leaving the series practically lost for decades, without reruns, merchandise, or promotional support. The Beagles faded from broadcast rotation with shocking speed. In many ways, they became victims of the paperwork rather than poor reception. Today, the show remains a forgotten time capsule, remembered only by collectors who track down rare surviving episodes. The Beagles represent a bold attempt to merge music with cartoons long before it became standard practice in animation. The Herculoids. The Herculoids stands as one of Hanna-Barbera's most imaginative creations, an intense sci-fi adventure set on the alien world of Quasar, where a heroic family defended their planet using a mix of ancient instinct and futuristic power. Led by Xandor, alongside Tara and their son Dorno, the group fought invaders with the help of unforgettable creatures: Zoc, the laser-eyed dragon, Tundro, the horned powerhouse, Egu, the rock giant, and the shape-shifting energy blobs Gloop and Gleep. Each episode played like a battle for survival. Space tyrants, mutant beasts, and mechanical armies descended upon Quasar, forcing the Herculoids to respond with primal ferocity and tight teamwork. The landscapes, crystal deserts, volcanic canyons, and glowing alien forests gave the series a sweeping atmosphere unmatched by many cartoons of its era. Even with limited animation, the action felt bold and cinematic. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera intended the Herculoids to stand apart from comedy-driven cartoons. There were no jokes, no pop music, and no modern slang, just pure adventure. But that seriousness made it harder to market to younger viewers, and without merchandise or heavy syndication, its visibility slowly faded. Today, the Herculoids survives as a cult favorite, a wild, cosmic frontier remembered for its raw imagination and unmistakable style. Fearless Fly, 1965. Fearless Fly emerged from the Milton the Monster show as one of the strangest superheroes of the 60s, a literal housefly who transformed into a powerful crime fighter, simply by putting on a pair of oversized glasses. This bizarre premise captured the quirky spirit of the decade, when studios experimented freely with heroes who defied logic but delighted audiences. In everyday life, he was Hiram, a timid fly, constantly bullied by larger insects. But when danger appeared, he donned his magical spectacles and became Fearless Fly, soaring through the air and firing energy beams from his hands. The show's villains ranged from mad scientists to monstrous insects, each designed with exaggerated features to match the cartoon's playful absurdity. Production relied heavily on comedy, embracing slapstick timing and exaggerated reactions rather than intense action sequences. The limited animation added an odd charm to the visuals, making everything slightly offbeat, in a way that perfectly fit the lead character's eccentricity. The segment gained popularity among fans of the Milton the Monster show, but never reached enough independent recognition to survive on its own. Over time, Fearless Fly slipped into obscurity, overshadowed by more conventional superheroes. Yet, for those who remember him, he remains a symbol of the creative freedom that defined 60s animation, a tiny winged champion who proved that even the smallest hero could save the day. The New Three Stooges, 1965. The new Three Stooges cartoon remains one of the most ambitious yet easily forgotten experiments of 60s animation. It was the only animated series in history to feature the actual surviving Stooges, Moe, Larry, and Curly Joe, performing live-action wraparound segments before each cartoon short. For children, this created a strange blend of slapstick legacy and new animated chaos. But for the studio, it became a monumental production challenge. The animated shorts attempted to replicate classic Stooge antics with exaggerated violence, pratfalls, and misunderstandings, woven into stories involving haunted houses, safari mishaps, scientific disasters, and bizarre jobs the trio were never qualified for. While the physical humor translated surprisingly well into animation, the pacing felt different from the Stooges' famous live films, creating an unusual hybrid tone that fans of the original sometimes struggled to accept. Behind the scenes, budget limitations and tight schedules forced the studio to reuse animation, frequently resulting in stiff, repetitive movement. The sheer number of episodes produced in a short span left little room for polish. Meanwhile, the live-action segments showed Moe and Larry aging rapidly, with Curly Joe trying to carry the comedic energy, an element that modern viewers find strangely poignant. Despite these issues, the show was syndicated heavily for a few years, before disappearing almost completely. Today it exists as a historic oddity remembered mostly by collectors and Stooge historians. It stands as a rare moment when an iconic comedy team tried to reinvent itself for a new generation through animation. The Lone Ranger, 1966. The animated Lone Ranger series brought the legendary Western hero into a stylized 60s format, but it never achieved the fame of earlier radio or television versions. Produced by Format Films, the cartoon followed the masked hero and his loyal companion Tonto as they rode across the frontier, battling outlaws, protecting towns, and delivering swift justice to villains who underestimated their resolve. The show emphasized moral lessons, bravery, and partnership, reflecting the original spirit of the franchise. Its visual style leaned heavily on angular mid-century design, giving characters sharp silhouettes, and a modernist aesthetic unusual for Westerns. Action sequences were fast and clean, though limited animation sometimes struggled to capture the full intensity of the Wild West. Still, the series attempted to keep the Lone Ranger brand alive during a period when Westerns were beginning to decline in popularity. Behind the scenes, format films faced stiff competition from larger studios and lacked the merchandising power available to Hanna-Barbera or Jay Ward. Without strong promotional backing, the show faded quietly despite delivering polished storytelling. The absence of heavy humor or fantastical elements also made it less appealing to younger viewers who gravitated towards superheroes and slapstick-themed cartoons. Today, the 60s Lone Ranger cartoon survives as a forgotten chapter in the hero's long history. It represents a transitional moment when classic Western ideals clashed with the rapidly changing tastes of American children. The Super Six, 1966. The Super Six was a superhero parody series created by DePatie Freleng Enterprises, the same studio behind the Pink Panther shorts. This cartoon featured a roster of unconventional heroes whose abilities were more comedic than practical. Among them were Super Scuba Magneto Man, Granite Man, and Captain Zamo, each possessing bizarre powers that often created more trouble than they solved. The team operated under the guidance of Super Chief, who assigned missions from headquarters. Every episode followed a similar structure. A villain threatened the city. Super Chief selected a hero, and chaos ensued as the chosen character attempted to save the day with questionable competence. The humor leaned into slapstick misunderstandings and exaggerated visuals parodying the superhero boom of the era. Kids enjoyed the fast-paced antics, but the show lacked a single central protagonist, which made branding difficult. Behind the scenes, the studio aimed to capitalize on the 60s superhero wave, but without a clear marketing direction, networks struggled to promote it effectively. The limited animation also reduced some visual impact, though the bold character designs and colorful backdrops gave the series a distinct look compared to other comedic cartoons. Over time, the Super Six faded behind more iconic 60s heroes, yet it remains an important representation of the decade's playful experimental approach to superhero storytelling. It captured a period when studios were free to poke fun at the very genre dominating children's television. The Adventures of Gulliver, 1968. The Adventures of Gulliver was Hanna-Barbera's imaginative attempt to adapt Jonathan Swift's classic tale into a serialized Saturday morning adventure. The story followed young Gary Gulliver and his dog Tag, who survived a shipwreck and awoke in the land of the Lilliputians, miniature people, who immediately saw Gary as both protector and mystery. Unlike many 60s cartoons, this series carried an overarching plot centered on Gary's search for his missing father, whose disappearance was tied to a treasure map he carried. Each episode blended high fantasy with heartfelt character development. Gary defended the Lilliputians from giant birds pirates and villains like the scheming Captain Leech, who pursued the treasure map relentlessly. Despite his size, Gary was portrayed as gentle, thoughtful, and fiercely loyal, turning him into an unlikely guardian for the tiny kingdom. The Lilliputians themselves added warmth and humor to every conflict, giving the series a strong emotional core. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera invested more effort in character continuity than usual. The show featured serialized clues and recurring antagonists, which was rare for children's programming of the era. Yet its quiet tone and long-form storytelling were overshadowed by flashier superhero and sci-fi cartoons dominating Saturday mornings. Without heavy merchandise or prime network promotion, it struggled to remain visible. Today, The Adventures of Gulliver is remembered fondly by those who appreciate the studio's more thoughtful works. It stands as a gentle adventure series, driven by kindness, perseverance, and the bond between a boy and his loyal dog. The Bugaloos, 1969. The Bugaloos was one of Sid and Marty Krofft's strangest creations, a psychedelic blend of live-action music and fantasy that felt unlike anything else aimed at children. The characters were insect-themed teen performers, Joy Harmony, Courage, and IQ, who lived in the magical land of Tranquility Forest. Dressed in brightly colored costumes with tiny wings, they sang original songs and battled the schemes of the villain, Benita Bizarre, a flamboyant wannabe pop star determined to destroy their harmony. Although technically a live-action series, its surreal visual design, giant mushroom sets, and stylized costumes place it spiritually within the animation world of the era. The Bugaloos attempted to merge 60s counterculture with family television echoing pop trends inspired by the Beatles and the Monkees. Their melodies, soft personalities, and fantastical surroundings created a warm, almost dreamlike atmosphere that resonated with younger viewers. Behind the scenes, the Krofft brothers pushed production limits. The sets were expensive, and the musical numbers required extensive rehearsal, making the show more demanding than typical children's programming. Despite this effort, the series faced stiff competition and was canceled after one season. However, the music found a small cult following, and the characters occasionally resurfaced in nostalgia conventions. Today, the Bugaloos stands as a vibrant, forgotten experiment, a reminder of the era's willingness to blend genres and push creativity into colorful, unpredictable directions.